Let's get started. Welcome to the 10th version of the Latin American and Caribbean Higher Education Conference, LACHEC 2020, Rewiring International Education. My name is Camilo Forero, and I'm the Director of Global Initiatives at Fundación Universitaria Juan N. Corpas, and a member of RCI's National Committee and LACHEC's Organizing Board. We are so thrilled to have you join us today and for the next 3 weeks as we find different ways to reimagine, reinvent, and rewire the field of international education as higher ed undergoes and adapts to massive changes. On behalf of the RCI, our National Committee, and LACHEC's Organizing Committee, we want to welcome you to an event that has been crafted from the ground up as an immersive, interactive, and inspiring online event with nearly 900 participants from across the globe. We would like to extend a special thanks to our allies in the Government of Colombia, including the Ministry of Education and ICETEX for their support and sponsorship of this event, as well as to our friends and colleagues at the Colombian Association for Universities, ASCUN. In addition to the Government of Colombia, we want to thank all of our sponsors who helped make this possible. Thank you to our diamond sponsors, Fundación Universitaria Juan N. Corpas, Universidad Antonio Nariño, Inter-American Organization for Higher Education, Learn Chile, De Montfort University, QS, and the Conference of the Americas on International Education. Thank you to our gold sponsors, Alticia and Coursera. And thank you to our silver sponsors, Fundación Universitaria del Área Andina and Education New Zealand. We are also grateful to all of our exhibitors for contributing to the success of LACHEC 2020, and we invite you to swing by our expo booth as soon as we finish today's plenary. And finally, thank you to all of you, our attendees, for joining us today and making this our biggest LACHEC ever. Now, before we begin, I want to briefly tell you about the Colombian Network for Internationalization in Higher Education, or RCI for short. RCI is Colombia's largest network of higher education institutions that for over 25 years has nurtured cooperation and partnerships between Colombian HEIs and the world. With nearly 100 member institutions throughout Colombia, RCI is a diverse and wide-reaching network. By promoting a collaborative atmosphere with institutions of all shapes and sizes, RCI is able to foster academic, research, and outreach projects with partner universities worldwide. I was thanking all of you, our attendees, for joining us today and making this our biggest LACHEC ever. Now, before we begin, I want to briefly tell you about the Colombian Network for Internationalization in Higher Education, or RCI for short. RCI is Colombia's largest network of higher education institutions that for over 25 years has nurtured cooperation and partnerships between Colombian HEIs and the world. With nearly 100 member institutions throughout Colombia, RCI is a diverse and wide-reaching network. By promoting a collaborative atmosphere with institutions of all shapes and sizes, RCI is able to foster academic, research, and outreach projects with partner universities worldwide. It is in RCI's spirit of collaboration that we have built LACHEC and that we welcome you today. From now and until August 27th, we hope you will be able to engage with your peers in all of the academic, cultural, and networking spaces that LACHEC has to offer. I also want to let you know about this year's featured country, Chile. This vibrant nation and its robust educational system will be featured next week. I invite you to partake in all of our Chile Day activities at next week's live session on August 20th. Now, for now, I hope you enjoyed today's plenary session, which brings together changemakers in international education talking about today's theme, the emerging role of international education, fostering global citizenship. Ahora, quisiera invitar a nuestros primeros 3 invitados a por favor encender sus cámaras. I am thrilled to have 3 guests with us for today's opening session before we get started with our first panel session. I'm thrilled to have 3 guests with us for today's opening session. Colombia's Vice Minister for Higher Education, ASCUN's Executive Director, and RCI's National Coordinator. Now, without further ado, I would like to introduce and welcome our first guest. From Colombia's Ministry of Education, among other institutions, have been firm supporters of La CHEC throughout our many versions. The Minister of Education and her team, including today's guest, the Vice Minister of Higher Education, have shown firm commitment to strengthening international education within and throughout Colombia. Today, I would like to present to you the Vice Minister for Higher Education, Luis Fernando Pérez. Dr. Pérez, welcome, and please, go ahead.
Muy buenos días, Camilo. Welcome everybody that visits us from elsewhere in the region. La verdad es una gran ocasión. Creo que estoy viendo acá en el chat, tenemos más de 300 participantes conectados el día de hoy. Es un gran evento que podamos hacer la CHEC en este momento. Así que, pues, de verdad, un saludo muy importante para Sandra Guarín, perdón, la directora de Relaciones Internacionales en la Universidad Antonio Nariño y coordinadora en este momento de RCI. Un saludo muy especial a Oscar Domínguez como director ejecutivo de la Asociación Colombiana de Universidades, ASCUN. Y un saludo obviamente a todos los miembros y representantes de las delegaciones internacionales, muy especialmente AMPEI en México, FAUAI en Brasil y Redi Perú, así como Learn Chile y Fiesta.
Para el mejoramiento de la calidad en la educación superior. Creo que es un elemento muy inspirador esa misión y creo que en buena medida estas 10 versiones de la Conferencia Latinoamericana y Caribeña de la Educación Superior así lo demuestran. Hemos sido capaces en Colombia de hacer la reflexión de esta región latinoamericana con su español como idioma predominante, con su portugués, con su inglés, con su francés, y hemos visto un espacio de diálogo y de reflexión para vernos en una sociedad multicultural, pluriétnica, que permite hacer reflexiones desde los diferentes referentes y permite entonces que en la educación superior estos referentes sean transversales a los procesos de formación. Y nos han permitido, lo sabe Sandra porque ha sido una entusiasta de esta estrategia, que hemos tenido la posibilidad en esta conferencia latinoamericana de internacionalización de tener expertos internacionales y a los mismos aliados internacionales del más alto nivel. Por aquí han pasado personajes de Europa, de Estados Unidos, de Asia, contándonos lo que es la internacionalización, lo que se puede hacer en la internacionalización en educación superior. Y eso ha sido muy valioso. Fíjense ustedes que en la experiencia que uno tiene en el recorrido que esta red ha hecho y este trabajo y esta conferencia de manera particular en su 10ª versión ha logrado, en la posibilidad de que esta conferencia se hubiera movido por el país, que fue uno de los grandes intereses que tuvimos, el haber estado en Bogotá, en Medellín, en Bucaramanga y en Villavicencio, a propósito de, y ahí tengo Sandra con su venia y con todos los asistentes, tal vez 30 segundos tomarme para decir, en el Meta, en el departamento del Meta, cuando en Villavicencio se hizo la conferencia latinoamericana, hubo un antes y un después de la CHEC. Hubo un después donde se dinamizaron procesos de internacionalización valiosísimos, universidades que no habían tenido por su rol de lo regional posibilidades de meterse en la internacionalización en todas sus dimensiones, más allá de la movilidad, lo hicieron a partir de esta conferencia. Lo que aprendieron las instituciones de educación superior en la región de cómo era el tema de internacionalización y todo lo que promovía la CHEC fue absolutamente valioso. Entonces esto quiere decir que esta apuesta por la descentralización, por la democracia de la educación superior, de alguna manera da cuenta de eso que la CHEC tiene como valores, la RCI tiene como valores, que es estas apuestas de liderazgo, de la solidaridad, de la responsabilidad social, de la comunicación, que de alguna manera han permitido los logros que hoy tenemos. De tal suerte que solo puedo desde ASCUN a nombre de los señores rectores de nuestro consejo directivo, de nuestras más 88 instituciones que forman parte de nuestra asociación, expresar la gratitud al ministerio, la gratitud a usted, doctor Manuel Acevedo, presidente del ISTETEIS, que ha sido socio estratégico en todo este recorrido. Desde luego también reconocer la manera como Santiago Fernández de Soto, la persona encargada de internacionalización en el ministerio, nos ha facilitado poder de alguna manera desarrollar los diálogos que hoy nos tienen en esta jornada. Y bueno, sigamos en esa propuesta. En ASCUN tenemos un eslogan que queremos acuñar y que es de alguna manera frase inspiradora para nosotros. en la medida en que construyamos universidad, somos capaces de transformar sociedad. Y creo que en este momento, en el momento en que, como bien lo insistió varias veces el señor viceministro, la pandemia nos puso hoy a buscar lo mejor de nosotros para sacar lo mejor de la fortaleza y la capacidad de adaptación para hacer esta versión posible y todas las acciones de educación superior en el escenario de esta pandemia que nos tiene en aislamiento. Tenemos que mantenernos en esa lógica y saber que todo lo que hacemos busca ese principio de calidad de la educación superior en que todos estamos comprometidos. Sandra, nuevamente a usted, gracias. Y Camilo, muchas gracias también por esta excelente coordinación. Abrazos para todos desde ASCUN y gracias por participar de estas jornadas que serán sin duda de gran contribución para sus procesos de reflexión y análisis en internacionalización. Un abrazo fraterno desde ASCUN.
Doctor Domínguez, muchísimas gracias por sus palabras. Sin duda, la CHEC sería imposible también sin este compromiso de ASCUN con la CHEC y con la RCI. So thank you so much, Dr. Domínguez. We could not agree more, and we thank you once again for your commitment to la CHEC and RCI. Now, our next guest, my dear friend and colleague and partner in crime in getting la CHEC 2020 off the ground, Sandra Guarín is the Director of International Relations at Universidad Antonio Nariño and is the National Coordinator for RCI. She has been instrumental in strengthening and diversifying RCI and has worked diligently to help get la CHEC 2020 up and running. Sandra, welcome. Go ahead.
Gracias, Camilo. Muy buenos días para todos. Señor Luis Fernando Pérez, Viceministro de Educación Superior. Señor Oscar Domínguez, Director Ejecutivo de ASCUN. Ponentes, participantes, patrocinadores, comité organizador. Hoy es un día muy importante para la Red Colombiana para la Internacionalización de la Educación Superior, RCI. Su producto estrella, la CHEC, la conferencia que ha convocado para su preparación a una gran diversidad de actores de Colombia y la región, a la que han contribuido tantos colegas, la que ha reunido a tantos practitioners, estudiosos y tomadores de decisiones de la educación internacional, hoy llega a su 10ª versión en un formato nunca antes imaginado. La CHEC 2020 se hará por primera vez en línea, como resultado de la suma de competencias del perfil global de las que tanto hablamos y que hemos debido poner en práctica. Trabajo en equipo, adaptabilidad al cambio, resiliencia, resolución de conflictos, creatividad, sumadas al espíritu colaborativo y a la apuesta por ser un espacio de encuentro, diálogo e intercambio multiactoral, en el que redes y espacios colaborativos de Colombia, LATAM, las Américas y el mundo son protagonistas. La CHEC 2020 es sin duda un hito para la educación internacional de Colombia. Bienvenidos a esta fiesta que durante 5 intensos meses hemos preparado con todo esmero. Sí, extrañamos recibirlos en alguna hermosa ciudad colombiana, pero al tiempo nos sentimos orgullosos de haber construido de forma colectiva esta experiencia virtual para todos, en la que tendremos un amplio espectro de oportunidades. Interactuar con speakers del más alto nivel y de diversas procedencias, conocer trabajos sobresalientes en construcción de ciudadanía global, innovación para la sostenibilidad y transformación de la enseñanza, el aprendizaje y la evaluación, conectar con colegas, proponer y participar en foros de discusión, disfrutar de ricos espacios sociales y culturales como el que tuvimos para dar inicio esta mañana, explorar las posibilidades de la gamificación, entre muchos otros. Aprovechemos las ventajas de lo virtual. Ya llegará el momento de encontrarnos presencialmente de nuevo. Esperamos muy pronto en Chile, en Argentina, FIESA 2021, CAEI 2021. Esperemos que realmente sea muy pronto. El espíritu colaborativo de la CHEC 2020 hace que el listado de agradecimientos sea extenso. Y esto es para nosotros un indicador de éxito en nuestro propósito de convocar, sumar y reunir. Gracias al Ministerio de Educación Nacional de Colombia, a ICETEX y a los demás miembros de la Mesa Intersectorial de Internacionalización de la Educación Superior de Colombia. Gracias a la Asociación Colombiana de Universidades ASCUN por su invaluable respaldo de siempre. Gracias a nuestras redes y asociaciones amigas, integrantes de la Iniciativa Latinoamericana para la Internacionalización de la Educación Superior, INILAT. Gracias a nuestros 13 patrocinadores, a Chile, país invitado de honor, a los 18 expositores y a las redes y espacios colaborativos asociados a la CHEC. Gracias a ustedes, nuestros cerca de 850 participantes de Argentina, Australia, Brasil, Bélgica, Canadá, Chile, Colombia, Costa Rica, Ecuador, El Salvador, España, Estados Unidos, Emiratos Árabes Unidos, Francia, México, Nueva Zelanda, Panamá, Perú, Puerto Rico, Reino Unido y República Dominicana. Por supuesto, gracias a Camilo Forero, quien puso las primeras piedras de esta conferencia sobre la que hemos seguido edificando él mismo y otros colegas y amigos, en un modelo colaborativo que nos recuerda las palabras del profesor Thomas Malone del MIT. Algunas de las grandes innovaciones del futuro no vendrán de nuevas tecnologías, sino de nuevas formas de colaborar. Todo mi reconocimiento y agradecimiento a los increíbles profesionales, miembros de nuestro comité organizador, por su compromiso e incansable trabajo. Frente a las cámaras nos vemos pocos, pero detrás de estas han estado todos ellos. Mil y mil gracias. Una mención muy especial a sus instituciones. Universidad Católica de Colombia, Universidad San Buenaventura, Fundación Universitaria del Área Andina, Universidad Antonio Nariño, Universidad de Antioquia, Remington, Universidad Nacional de Colombia, Universidad Católica de Manizales, Tecnológico de Antioquia, Universidad Católica de Oriente, Uniminuto, Corporación Universitaria Lasallista, Fundación Universitaria San Martín, Fundación Universidad de América, Universidad Pontificia Bolivariana, Escuela Superior de Administración Pública, Uniempresarial y Fundación Universitaria Juan N. Corpas. No puedo terminar sin referirme a nuestro contexto y a la compleja situación que atraviesa nuestra región. No es un momento fácil para Colombia ni para el LATAM. El COVID-19 continúa robando vidas cada día. Y aquí estamos nosotros, privilegiados, haciendo desde nuestro rol lo que está a nuestro alcance para contribuir a la sociedad a la que nos debemos. Que la CHEC 2020 sea un homenaje de quienes creemos en la educación internacional como un vehículo hacia un mundo mejor, a quienes han padecido la inclemencia de la pandemia y de complejas realidades socioeconómicas. Por todos ellos, por nuestras comunidades académicas y por el futuro, sigamos edificando juntos. Bienvenidos una vez más a esta construcción colectiva para la reconfiguración de la educación internacional. Muchas gracias.
Sandra, muchísimas gracias por tus palabras, por tu perspectiva y pues también darte las gracias a ti por tu rol instrumental y a todas las instituciones que mencionaste también, quienes han hecho posible la CHEC 2020. Y les comento que apagué la cámara para ver si mi hija ya estaba mejor y efectivamente ya está mejorcita del golpe. Muchísimas gracias a todos por sus palabras que me estaban llegando en los mensajes. Entonces ya Ceci está muy bien. Muchas gracias. Now, let's get our first keynote panel underway. At this point, I would please ask our moderator, Ann Mason, and the rest of our panelists to please turn on your Zoom cameras. Le pediría por favor a nuestros siguientes panelistas favor encender sus cámaras. Now let me please introduce the moderator for our keynote session. Ann Mason is an international education leader with over 25 years experience in higher education internationalization and U.S. Latin America academic cooperation. Ann is the founder of Mason Education Group, an international education consulting firm based in Bogotá, Colombia. She advises government entities, universities, and foundations on internationalization strategy development, organizational assessment, partnership development, and program design, and has worked with the World Bank, the Institute for International Education, LASPAO, the Colombian Land Grant University Initiative, the U.S. Embassy in Bogotá, and many higher education stakeholders in Colombia. She currently directs the U.S. State Department's U.S.-Colombia Higher Education Partnership Initiative and serves on the board of directors of NAFSA. Ann's previous positions include the executive director of the U.S.-Colombia Fulbright Commission and professor and chair of the Political Science Department at the University of the Andes, both in Bogotá. She has also been a member of the board of directors of the University of Rosario, the Accreditation Standards Steering Committee of the Network of Schools of Public Policy, of the Network of Schools of Public Policy Affairs and Administrations, NASPA, and chair of NAFSA's Teaching, Learning, and Scholarship Community and its Latin American Forum. Ann holds a PhD in political science from Yale University. Ann, welcome to La CHEC 2020, and thank you for joining us. Please take it away.
Thank you, Camilo, very much for that warm introduction, and a very warm welcome to my co-panelists, who I confess I'm meeting for the first time, but this is the power and the beauty of technology. Before we get into the panel, I want to thank so much la Red Colombiana para la Internacionalización de la Educación Superior, a la ASCUN, y the organizing committee of the La CHEC conference, particularly Camilo, to you, to Sandra Guarin, and to Matias Marin. I'd also especially like to thank Fernando Tejes for inviting me to be with you this morning on this opening session. I'm just delighted to be here moderating this very important discussion on the role of global citizenship in international education. The topic is timely, it's highly relevant, and also it's quite controversial. We are very fortunate to have three distinguished speakers to share their thoughts and insights on global competencies and the global citizenship framework. I'll introduce each of them briefly to our audience, and then you can find their full CVs on the La CHEC platform. I'd first like to introduce Mario Piacentini. Good morning, Mario, and welcome. Mario is a senior analyst at the OECD based in Paris. Mario leads the work on the PISA assessments of 21st century skills and is also the lead author of the framework for the PISA 2018 assessment of global competence and for the PISA 2021 assessment of creative thinking. He has also worked at the University of Geneva and at the World Bank, and Mario holds a PhD in economics from the University of Geneva. I'd also like to introduce and extend a warm welcome to Moussa Magassa. Moussa, hello, very nice to meet you. Moussa is originally from Senegal, and he is currently the human rights educator at the University of Victoria in British Columbia, Canada, where he focuses on the university's human rights, equity, and diversity goals. Moussa is an expert in intercultural communication, intercultural conflict resolution, human rights, social justice, diversity and inclusion, as well as immigrant and refugee issues. He has a master's degree in human security and peace building and a PhD in curriculum and instruction with a focus on critical race theory. He also co-chairs an initiative called Resilience BC, British Columbia. This is an anti-racism advisory committee and strategic planning hub for the province of British Columbia. Moussa, a very warm welcome to you. And our third panelist today, Sara Ladrón de Guevara. Sara, muy buenos días, bienvenida. Sara es the president, rectora de la Universidad Veracruzana en el estado de Veracruz in Mexico since 2013. She's also vice president of the Inter-American Organization for Higher Education. Sara is an archaeologist by training with a master's degree in archaeology and art history from La Sorbona. She also holds a doctorate in anthropology from UNAM, la Universidad Nacional Autónoma de México. In addition to being a professor and researcher, she has held the position of academic secretary of La Universidad Veracruzana, and she was a board member of the National Institute of Anthropology of Mexico, and also the director of the Museum of Anthropology in Xalapa. She's also been visiting professors at universities, both in the United States and in France, including La Sorbona. Again, a very warm welcome to each of you. Our three guests have quite an extraordinary cross-section of cultures, backgrounds, academic fields, and experiences. So I think this is the perfect recipe to have a very lively conversation this morning on global citizenship and global competences.
And if I may interrupt you for 1 second, just so you know, we're trying to get Sara connected. She's not currently in the session, but please go ahead. And we're working behind the scenes together.
Okay, thanks for that heads up, because I didn't see her and I wasn't sure if she was just off screen. Thank you. Our session this morning will be a facilitated conversation among our expert guests. They will not make opening statements per se, but rather we're just going to jump into questions on international education and global citizenship. I understand that we have about 45 minutes in all for this session, slightly less than what we expected. So we will keep our conversation going for about 35 minutes. And then we'll dedicate the last 10 minutes to Q&A with our audience, because we really want to hear from all of you who are connected. So I'd like to start with a brief discussion on definitional and conceptual issues. You know, in the field of international education, which is my space, developing global citizenship and global competencies in students is one of the most significant rationales, right, for the internationalization of higher education. But in my experience, both as a professional and as a faculty member, there's not much conceptual clarity about what this really means. So as a good social scientist, as a political scientist, I would like to start the discussion by defining our terms. Musa, could you take this first question? What does it mean to be a citizen of the world or a global citizen? What's your defining framework for this concept?
Wow. Good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for having me on this platform and this conference. I can just feel the warmth of Colombia and the world around. So, and the question is very, very tricky. You're right. Internationalization first doesn't have a very clear definition, but when we talk about global citizenship, it is more complex than ever for two reasons. The first one is that when we talk about global citizenship, we have to deconstruct the concept global first. What is global? And then we can talk about citizenship. But first and foremost, we know that the concept of global, as all of us, we understand it in the definition, global will mean that it is an interaction, that it is equality or equity of exchange and understanding. And we know what we call globalization. We know the problem with globalization is that we don't have that equality, we don't have that, defined exchange that makes the world a peaceful place. So then when we say global citizenship, the concept of citizenship itself being so confusing and so complex, because who is a citizen? Is it because you are born in a country that you are a citizen, or because your ancestors are from that country, you are a citizen? People like me, I'm a Canadian citizen, but I was born in Senegal. So I will always be hyphenated citizen. People will call me a Canadian of Senegalese descent. So now imagine you put these two concepts together, global citizenship. It's supposed to be citizen who can be global, who can go around the world and be everywhere they are, they can be seen as citizen of that place. But that doesn't happen because we know that neocolonialism, and we know the issues of globalization, we know about colonization, and we know about ethnocentrism. All these have made the world a place where what we call global is uneven. It is not equitable. So global citizenship, at the end of the day, I will say it is a concept in the working. So we're still working on it. Everyone will define it the way they want, depending not only where they stand in, but also what are the powers and the needs they want to serve in coining that definition.
Mario, what would you like to add to Musa's critical reflection on the concept of global citizenship?
Yes. Good morning, everybody. Can you hear me well?
Perfectly.
Thank you. Thank you very much for inviting us. Your question is really at the core of the work I do every day. It's all about I work on assessment, and every good assessment starts from like a very solid conceptual definition of what you want to assess. And there was nothing more difficult than thinking or engaging in this project of assessing global citizenship skills and competencies. On one end, for what like Musa has already said, for all the complexities of meaning that are like embedded in these words like global. It's a word charged with meaning and with possible interpretations. And it's also possibly a divisive word and a word charged with like that, to which like lots of people with reason attach particular cultural values. For example, it's something that was coined in the West. The way we solved this problem of definition, it was really trying to focus on the competencies that we expect young people should be acquiring to become global citizens, to be global competencies. And when we discuss these competencies, the experts that worked with us on defining these skills, we quickly realized that even if all the experts have different hats, one was an expert in internationalization, one in interculturalism, another one in global citizenship. These were mostly labeled because at the end, we all agreed that essentially there are like some critical things that we expect, that we want to cultivate in young people. In our framework, we emphasize four. The first one is this like ability to critically examine news and events and situations. So this capacity to exercise critical thinking and not to be, for example, fooled by fake news. The second dimensions was about appreciating diversity of perspectives. This idea that if somebody else thinks differently from you, this gives you value. This diversity enrich your culture, your perspective, and your understanding. The third dimension was about intercultural communication and exchange. At the core of global citizenship, it's this capacity of adjusting communication, way of working and learning with respect to who you are interacting with. And the fourth is really the most important one, is this idea that we all care about these things because we all want our students to have an impact on the world. We want the sustainable development goal to become reality. So the fourth dimension is about this idea of taking action. And it's basically, it requires them all. It requires critical thinking, perspective taking, intercultural skills. And it requires like the spirit, the attitudes to engage at the local level, at the international level, and try to make a difference. So my response to this definition is that let's stop using labels and let's really focus about what are the learning goals that we want to achieve.
So Mario, if I may just follow up on your answer, I think something else that creates a lot of confusion for professors, for internationalization experts, and for students also in higher education spaces is, would you say then that global competencies and global citizenship are in fact the same thing, or do they go hand in hand? How can you help us better understand the relationship between two of the concepts that are most used in internationalization, but again, not very well understood?
Yes, we use the word global competencies mostly, but you will hear me talking about global competencies and citizenship at the same time. For me, it's the same thing. I might I know that some people will disagree, but the more I've been working on this, the more I see that all these differences in terminologies and in this and also in this academic divisions are not helping us to reach the goal that is a very difficult goal, that is to create space, time, resources for including international issues, interculturalism, debates, analysis of the contemporary, analysis of the big problems of the world like racism, violence, where creating this space is the priority, and that's where we might debate on you know, how much space should be given to learning about global issues like pandemics, globalization, and how much space should be given to learning about culture. But at the end, we will agree that all these things are important and need a space. And we need to like really work concretely to create, to work on curricula, to work on on teacher training, to make the practical step to move from this like academic discourse to practice.
Thank you. Camilo, is Sarah connected now to the conversation?
No, unfortunately, we don't have Sarah on yet.
Okay, that's fine.
I'll let you know as soon as we do, though.
Okay, thank you. Musa, you are located in a university setting in Canada. So the next question I'd like to pose to you, you know, I think that for many of us, we think of civic education as a function of primary and secondary education. This is where young children in any society, right, become, you know, they developed concepts of the nation, they develop concepts of their culture and their society. What role do you see that universities and higher education have in educating for global citizenship, or educating their students in how to be globally competent? Maybe to use Mario's preference that we talk about global competencies, which is perhaps a bit more precise than global citizenship. Do you think that this is really a function of higher education?
Yes and no. Yes, in one sense, because I think the disparity we have here, and this is a critique that is very ongoing here in Canada, is that universities have failed to educate the educator. To educate the educator, I mean the teachers who are going to educate high school students. Universities have failed to educate them in those values of global citizenship itself. What I mean by that is that the education, as we can see, is very Eurocentric. It's very focused on values that definitely doesn't translate in the primary school and the secondary school, where a student have the diversity of a student is beyond the curriculum that is being pushed to them. So universities need then to first and foremost to revise their curriculum and include global citizenship in the education of teachers who are going to educate our children outside of the university. This is one. The second thing is that in order to, as I say earlier on, global citizenship has to be deconstructed. The terminology has to be deconstructed and to be reviewed. And it has to include then not only internationalization, but also indigeneity. It has to look at diversity. And as Mario was talking about, cultural competency. But which cultural competency are we talking about? When we say cultural competency, which culture are we talking about? Are we talking about a global culture? Or are we're talking about the culture of the place, the land, the culture of the institution? So this, for me, are very critical, first and foremost. Does university has a role? Yes. It has a great role if it can achieve it. If it achieves it, then I think we can see a different approach and a different understanding of a global citizenship.
Thank you. I have a whole set of questions that we'll get to shortly on universalism versus the cultural specific nature of the values and the skills that we're talking about. And I know you're dying to jump into that conversation. If I can just follow up with one additional question on the higher education space.
Yes.
Musa, when we look at a university environment, and if we agree that it's an important, leaving aside again the critical analysis of the competencies themselves, if we agree that that's an important educational space for educating our students to be globally and interculturally competent, who is responsible for that within the universities? Is this a faculty function? would we really expect a professor of biochemistry to know how to do this? What about when we have faculty themselves who are not interculturally competent?
Yes.
Not for any fault of their own, perhaps just their life circumstances. So if our faculty in the curriculum is not the place to do this, what is the responsible body within our university cultures to carry out this function? Tell us a little bit about what it's like at the University of Victoria.
Excellent. I love this question. I think I will say, let me start by being a bit general. It is our responsibility, everyone in the institution. But the specific responsibility in the university will reside, I will say, from the top to the bottom. The university curriculum development at the president level, the vice president level, I think there need to be a clear understanding or conversation about what is global citizenship, why it is important for our university to implement it, what it is, and how to do this. But most importantly, I go back to responsibility. If we commit to it, what will happen if we don't do it? We will have to take the fall. We will have to be responsible. Where should we go to look for help? So I will say it is a responsibility of the institution at the top, and then academics and faculty have to also have a responsibility, because you can give them the directive in the policy-wise, you can give them the directive, but it will be up to them to implement it in their classroom day in, day out. For this, they need to be motivation. They need to be a clear message about why it is important for us. Sandra, and I will even go beyond the university and also tackle the ministry. I will say the ministries of education might have, higher education might have a say there. If we really turn global citizenship, the conversation, but also the need, if we turn it as a survival skill, if we say that this should be part and parcel of the instruction of the education, because remember, global citizenship, as me I see it, it is not only about curriculum, it is also global solidarity. It is being able to function in a world that is global, whether we want it or not, but it is also a way to do this in a way that is gentle, in a way that is human, and in a way that is equitable to everyone. And that's why I say that the piece of responsibility is very important. But if you apply responsibility and you don't tell people that if this is your responsibility, if you don't do it, here's the penalty, then people can get away with it. And in higher education, because the tenure process, we know that academics and faculty oftentimes can also dig in and refuse to do things because they can get away with it. So global citizenship should not be an option if we have to implement it in our institution.
Thank you, Musa. Following up on Musa's answer, Mario, you know, your directorate at the OECD, you know, is the author, right? Has developed this framework for global competencies that I think universities all around the world are using. I'd love to hear your position on what is the most effective way to educate for global competencies, again, in a higher education space. And very critically, how do we know if we're doing it correctly? How do we measure if students are really achieving their learning objectives and outcomes through, whether it's through curriculum internationalization or whether it's through extracurricular spaces? How do we know if we're doing it correctly?
Yeah, I might start from saying that there is not a single way of doing it correctly. At the same time, you're absolutely right. There is going to be no sustained progress if we are not able to do any evaluation, any assessment of effectiveness. And this is something that is critically missing, and not only in the higher education context that I'm not very, very familiar with, but also at the lower level of education that I work mostly with. The idea is that everything must be well integrated. Everything starts with the definition of objectives. What do you want students to learn? And I think, as Musa said, it's very important that this is that there is some decision making around that. And again, all systems are quite different. All countries are different in the way they approach curricula and objective of assessment. In some countries like Italy, there is a lot of delegation to the schools and to the universities and to the teachers themselves to choose them. So it could be at the higher level of the ministry, or it could be very decentralized. In all contexts, there has to be a process of like people, like faculties, or all teachers in a school meeting together and trying to have like a discussion, like a collegial agreement on what they want to achieve. And then starting from that, the second layer is defining how. So putting together a good set of activities that you can implement. And there are essentially two main ways. One is integrate in the existing subjects. For example, you talk about biochemistry. There are quite a lot of opportunities within the science to make connection to global problems, and even in mathematics. So the first thing is to find integration point for framing, for connecting your curricula, your disciplinary objectives with these global issues. And the second is by creating space for specific courses. For example, on human rights, there has to be a space, a time that is just dedicated to discussing human rights, and then the assessment becomes natural once you have a goal defined, once you have activities that are defined. The best way you can assess is not doing the PISA way. So for PISA, we just want a snapshot. We want to compare all countries in one point in time and say what the situation is. For like institutions like universities or schools, you want to see progress, and you want to have like as much information as possible. And from my experience, the best way of doing this is through portfolio approaches, in which you give opportunities to students to continuously document what they are doing, not just within the university space, but also outside. And at the end of a term, at the end of a courses, you have multiple demonstrations that the students have been actually doing things. And then you can also have some kind of summative assessment of general evaluation. And I could speak a lot about multiple ways of doing it, but I think the most important way, the most productive way of assessing is by creating this portfolio approach and having a more qualitative and formative discussion with the students about their improvements.
Thank you, Mario. That's incredibly helpful, actually, and I think that most of the people who work in internationalization in higher education will find your explanation very, very structured and very, very understandable. So thank you for that. I'd like to go back and pick up on something that Musa mentioned in his very first answer, I believe, about this question that's inherent in the idea of global citizenry, that somehow there is a universal a notion or construct. Musa, I mean, can we talk about global values that would be inherent in a global citizenship model? And can we apply, say, the OECD's Mario, I'm not picking on you, but that's the model that's out there. Can we apply a global competency model uniformly across cultures? Or should we be unpacking knowledge and skills and values in different cultural contexts? So help us understand how you see, if this is another example of kind of a Western-centric kind of, you know, technical developments that are gaining traction globally, or if we should be approaching this from a very different way. Your microphone.
I will say, and definitely we should approach it differently, and that's why a few years ago I worked on a project to write a paper on global citizenship with another professor in another university. At the end, we came to the conclusion whether we want to give the paper to the organizations that ask us to write this paper. Once we finished everything, we decided no. We deleted it. We just decided we don't want to give this to them because our worry was how they're going to use this. Are they going to look at it globally, as we say? So my answer was, and the reason why we decided not to go forward with that, publish that paper, the reason was very simple. Global citizenship needs to be unpacked. It needs to be deconstructed, as I say. And it needs to be deconstructed and unpacked not only in the classroom, not only at the institution level, but I think at all levels. But most importantly, it needs to look at the issues that brought global citizenship. If we're looking at the globalization of education, then global citizenship, whether it is about education or it is about anything else, it needs to be unpacked and looked at the cultural level. The values can't be in global citizenship. The values will be in specific countries and their cultures and specific institutions and their cultures. And we have to find a bridge, how to have a conversation about this. Because if not, we will go again to the same thing we did. And that's still going on. It is globalization. It is all the Western ways of imposing things on other countries and calling it globalization. Me, I will say that global citizenship, we need to use the framework of human rights to analyze it. We need to use the framework of, international relationship and the disparity and the injustices we see in the world. So not only political, not only sociological, not only legal, but there is a lot of framework we have to really use to have this conversation and have it in a way that it is equitable. In our paper, we talk about the global-local. Okay. And I think someone just put it here, that global and local. So there need to be a conversation there. Finally, and one thing I want to add when we talk about this conversation, especially when we were talking about civic education and globalization in higher education, I want to bring it again to the educating the educator in specific values that really can make global citizenship palatable for all of us. At the University of Victoria, what we did when the university was talking about internationalization, globalization, and so on, so we say, what are our faculty and our students are missing? So educating them about human rights, educating them about intercultural communication, intercultural conflict resolution, anti-racism, but also training people to deconstruct their own curriculum. We did an assessment that left all of us laughing for days and days. In one department, we took 6 courses randomly, and we tried to see in the readings what is global there, because those professors have applied to get some funding to revise their curriculum and align it with internationalization. And when we look at the curriculum or the readings in their syllabus, it was shocking. There was nothing that really aligned with global citizenship or internationalization or whatever you call. But most importantly, what was interesting was that curriculums, the readings, some of them were from 1967, the year I was born. So how do you think those readings can catch up with the debate we have today? So again, those are the kind of things I will just say, that global citizenship is not a global value in the sense that the local conversation is not done yet.
Thank you, Musa. I'm looking at the clock here, and we're getting short on time. So I do have. I'd like first to Mario to have you respond to that, but very briefly. Then I have one question. Sorry. Then I have one question I'd like to pose to both of you, and then we'll wrap up and we'll go to questions from the public. So Mario, please.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I fully agree with Musa about all the risk of using this concept of global values or uniform frameworks, and that everything has to be contextualized and at the very low level of, as I said, like in conversation, for example, between groups of teachers, to redefine what it means in their context, in their environment, within their neighborhood, what these values mean for them. Then there is also a risk of of saying that since it's impossible to define global values, then we take the thing aside. But we know that values are really at the core of what transformation is. It's the central objective of all education. So my challenge was that my own perspective is that there is a core, and we need to discuss of core values that are the values of human dignity as defined in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and the value of respecting and valuing the diversity. So it's important. I think it's useful to reflect, to put forward this idea that the idea that every individual is born equal in rights and dignity, and every individual should do something for the others. These are core values that pretty much apply in every culture, even if they are contextualized differently.
I'd like to ask a last question related to current global dynamics, and then we'll go to the Q&A. You know, we all look at the world around us, and we see growing nationalisms on every continent, hostility to global governance and to international cooperation. And these developments make me wonder if global citizenship is really a rhetorical tool, but every day we see it contradicted by the reality of extreme nationalism. So can you help us understand, and I'd like to hear from both of you on this, help us understand how global citizenship and global competencies are still relevant in a world that is increasingly dominated by nationalist tendencies as countries seek to limit diversity, limit multiculturalism, limit intercultural societies. Musa?
Well, that's great. I love this question. I just wish we can spend the whole day talking about it. Well, and there is a workshop I took to schools and on the road outside of the university, and I go to school and I challenge the young people and I say, what are the biggest challenges the world is facing now, and what do you need in order to fix it? And they go crazy on it. These kids have the solution. So with the problem of where the global citizenship is relevant in a world that is resisting it, it is because we haven't had that conversation about what it is the benefit, and why we need it, whether it is a survival issue, or it is a solidarity issue, or it is an economic imperative. We have not had this conversation with everyone. If those conversations are being had, they are being happening up here, and the citizenry is not aware what it is. This is one. But the second thing is that there is issues in the world that we are not solving issues of inequity and justice, but most importantly, issues of fear. People are worried about the future, and this makes them resist foreigners. I lived in South Africa for many years before, Mandela came out of prison, and after that. One of the experience we had was xenophobia, when foreigners and people who are from different cultural backgrounds come in a space where there is already scarcity for the local. So I think the scarcity, the fact that the resources are limited and not enough for everyone, have brought xenophobia, as well as in the world this resistance to globalization. But just because conversations are not there and the disparities in society, economically, politically, are not addressed. The last thing I will add is that at the end of the day, whether we want it or not, globalization is here. Global citizenship is on the table. We need to find a way to address it. I think Mario was talking about global competencies, and this has first and foremost been deconstructed and explained what they are, why we need it, and how it is going to benefit us, the whole world. And then we have to look at, as I say, the fairness and the equity in this, everything we're doing. We can't talk about global citizenship where it is just one way, where it benefits a segment of the world and the rest have just to comply. That's not global citizenship. Global citizenship should not be compliance. It not be that should not be imposed on everyone. Global citizenship should be something that all of us we demand, we want, and when we get it, we will feel happy that it is happening. It is very simple. The language should be very simple, and I usually say academic has to turn into plain English in order to make this happening in the street.
Thank you. Mario, what's your take on this issue of nationalism versus global citizenship?
I mean, it was my motivation to start working on this, and I would, and this keeps me very motivated. And I have met over the years many people that have this energy and optimism to believe that this is that this trend that we are all living can be inverted. And I believe that your point about nationalism is just another message to say that we should be doing more, and we should be getting very concrete about yes, I say like about not speaking too much about it, but starting to make concrete steps to include these issues, these opportunities to learn in the curriculum. I think that racism, nationalism are mostly fueled and driven by ignorance. So there is a very simple way to redress, to like counter them, is by having discussion on things, and giving children from an early age opportunity to basically call all the lies. For example, on the immigrants, it's all the like racism and the anti-immigration rhetorics is mostly built on a set of big lies and fake statistics. And and the children are exposed to that. And particularly children who come from like disadvantaged backgrounds. So having this opportunity to discuss facts, to discuss that it's not true that immigrants are responsible for 80% of the violent crime in the countries. We can show you that this is not true. This is already something that changed mindsets. So all this opportunity to speak concretely about real things with real data and to counter fake news, it's one thing. The second thing is by give opportunities. I think I'm optimistic because schools, communities are getting more mixed. And if you create the environment for good interactions and good communication across diversity, across diverse races and ethnicities, children will find out that they actually, there is no reason to like believe that this kid from this other ethnic group or background is a threat for me. So, but again, for this, you need to create opportunities to learn. You need to engage students in project work, in community-based learning, in all these practical activities in which they experience diversity and they learn by themselves that maybe also things that their parents say are not true.
Thank you so much. We're going, in the few minutes we have remaining, we're going to take some of the questions that have come in from our audience. Mario, I'd like to give you the first question. Has COVID-19 and similar transnational challenges, does this strengthen our belief in the importance of global citizenship, or does it weaken it?
Definitely, it proves the importance of it for many things. It shows that it's important to collaborate. All the, I don't know how to call it, but all the scientific maths and interpretation on treatments, prevention measures. If there was more collaboration and better collaboration internationally, we would have more clarity by now. You have seen the impact of fake news on how people reacted and perceived this threat. So again, being educated to not just believe what you hear, but to challenge it, it's crucially important. And then it has been a big challenge for like our adaptivity and resilience. And global competencies are also very much about that. Being able to thrive and to keep functioning when things get very complicated. And these are again things that you don't learn them just at school, but schools and I believe also universities can do something about it.
Thank you, Mario. Musa, a question for you is again about the university learning environment. And the question says that it's important to develop global citizenship in our students, but also in the entire academic community, not only faculty, but staff, administrators, everyone. What recommendations can you have very briefly on how that could be achieved?
I think beside, as I say, having a policy that really insists that this need to be done, what you can do in your university to develop this, you have to explain how it fit in the strategic plan of the university. So the university has not only to recognize this in the strategic plan, in the policy, but most importantly, it has to put the resources that are needed. It has also to put the resources not only in money-wise, but also in the instructor, people who are going to do this. If you have your university members to take training or to learn about global citizenship, they should be able to do this as part of their work, but not on the side. And again, you have to decide whether you want this to be compulsory or voluntarily. Either way, it has to be recognized for people who take this. In university, what doesn't count is not important. So it needs to be acknowledged that people have done this education and this work, and it has to be acknowledged in their performance. So I will just say simply, this is what should happen. Not only in the classroom, but not only with the staff, but also I will say with the student. And it should not be done in sections. If you can bring everyone together, the pollination will really help. If you can have a workshop or a symposium where you have a student, staff, and faculty, I think it will make a big difference. But you can do both. You can have them separate and then bring them together. But as I say, the leadership has to buy into this idea, and it should be a priority, and resources should be committed to it.
Thank you for that. I think that answer really goes to the heart of this session, which is on how to foment international citizenship within our institutions of higher education. So thank you for those recommendations. Gentlemen, I will give each of you 30 seconds to close. I would invite you to respond to what I always end with, and that is, so what? Why is this important? Why does this matter? Mario.
Mario, go ahead.
Very difficult in 30 seconds. I think I already said it. We live in an age in which it's critically important to have people who are critical, who can interact peacefully and respectfully with others, and who can find the motivation and the values for making an impact, even only in their local space. And the how it's get it done, don't get lost in the politics of it. It's just like my history with this work is that it's going to be extremely difficult. So we don't have to underestimate the difficulty of a blockage, because essentially policymakers, it's often a scary thing because it easily gets politicized. I don't know if there is a way of not getting political with it, but this makes things extremely hard. So as Musa said, we need strong leaders, and we need strong leaders in faculties. We need strong leaders in schools that can drive this movement, and I think everybody can make a difference from his space, his place, his function. But we need to act, because we are like, the world, as you said, is not going in a good direction.
Musa, you have the last word on our panel today. So what?
Mutual survival and growth. We need to really accept that the concept is here, the conversation need to be had. And then we need to understand that global citizenship is here. We can work on it by focusing on values, key values that at the local level before we go to the global level. And those key values at the local level are solidarity, they are development, they are mutual survival, and it is growth for everyone. If we think it this way, and we can sell this conversation to our faculty, our students, and our staff, but most importantly to our society, because the students are going to go out and look for a job. So they have to take skills that they can sell out. They can sell outside in the industry. So this, for me, will be very important. If we can focus on the survival need for global citizenship and the growth it can bring to us. But we will have to also recognize the critics and understand that it won't be easy, but it can happen if we have a strategic plan to start with, and we have a buy-in at all levels.
Musa Mugasa from the University of Victoria in British Columbia, and Mario Piacentini from the OECD in Paris. Thank you both so much. I have learned so much from listening to you speak to this very important topic. My personal takeaways are that global and local are not mutually exclusive. They're intimately intertwined. So any global construct necessarily incorporates local contexts and local values and knowledge. This is not easy, but neither is internationalization, and that's what everyone connected today is passionate about. So thank you very much for opening the LACHEC 2020 conference with your insights today. I wish you both a good day, and thanks again. It was really just brilliant. Camilo.
Thank you. Thank you, Anne. Thank you, Musa.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Mario. Thank you, Anne. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much once again to our panelists. I haven't figured out quite yet how to do clapping in these virtual settings, but a round of applause for all of you. That was really a fascinating discussion and a great start to LACHEC's enriching dialogue from a practical, a philosophical, and pedagogical perspectives. And I think that those words really challenge and motivate us to continue working to foment global citizenship and to look inside ourselves to see how we can continue to break down stereotypes and open the doors of our institutions to migrants and to refugees, for example, as Mario and Musa mentioned, but also to the less fortunate in our own societies. And I think that those are inspiring words at the end, also to not get lost in the politics, but let's just get to work at the local and at the global level, which are always intertwined. And so thank you once again. And I just want to encourage our attendees to continue engaging and discussing in our community forums on these topics. Now, you may go ahead and turn off your cameras. And en este momento, le pediría por favor a nuestros conferencistas de las redes latinoamericanas, por favor, encender sus cámaras. Ahora, la CHEC 2020 ha sido una de las grandes apuestas de la RCI para este año, adaptándonos a esta nueva realidad, pero no ha sido la única. La colaboración, la cooperación y las acciones concretas han sido nuestro norte en la RCI. Sin embargo, para tener un éxito concreto y sostenible, esta colaboración no puede quedarse dentro de nuestras instituciones y nuestros países de origen. Debemos cruzar fronteras y aliarnos con nuestros colegas a nivel regional e internacional. Esta filosofía de la cooperación que nos lleva a la acción es lo que inspiró una nueva iniciativa regional y otra gran apuesta nuestra y gran apuesta de otras redes, la cual lanzamos hoy. Pero no quiero aún revelar ningún secreto. Eso se lo dejaré a nuestros siguientes invitados. Entonces, uno por uno los presentaré si quieren decir un hola, buenos días, y luego ya daremos inicio a nuestra sesión. Entonces, arranco por favor presentando de nuevo a Sandra Guarín de la RCI.
Muy buenos días para todos una vez más.
Gracias, Sandra. Marcos Ailes de Learn Chile.
Hola, ¿cómo están? Buenos días. Gusto saludarlos a todos y a todas.
Gracias, Marcos. A Daniel Antenucci de FIESA.
Hola, buenos días. Un encanto estar aquí con ustedes compartiendo este espacio.
Daniel, muchas gracias. A René Sigman de FAUBAI.
Hola, buenos días, buen día. Un gusto estar acá y felicitaciones por la CHEC, que empieza lo mejor.
Muy obrigado, René. A César Gutiérrez de AMPEI.
Hola, muy buenos días. Gracias por el espacio y felicidades por esta gran primer LACHEC 2020, primer LACHEC virtual. Felicidades.
Muchísimas gracias. Y a Mariela Olivos de Ready Perú.
Muchas gracias. Buen día a todos desde Lima. Mil felicitaciones a la CHEC, muchos éxitos y que sea muy productivo estas sesiones. Gracias.
Muchísimas gracias, Mariela. Perdón. Bueno, entonces, queridos colegas, les doy la palabra a Enilat.
Bueno, muy buenos días nuevamente. Felicitaciones por este gran inicio de la CHEC. Estamos muy contentos como Chile. Y esta mañana, en nombre de Learn Chile y de las 24 instituciones de educación superior que forman parte de este consorcio y marca sectorial del país, estamos participando en este lanzamiento, presentación pública de nuestra iniciativa. Hemos venido trabajando, muchos de ustedes han participado en nuestros encuentros y seminarios, pero hoy día vamos a, como decía Camilo, vamos a develar los secretos, vamos a bajar la cortina sobre el nombre de la iniciativa. Como ustedes ya están viendo en pantalla, la hemos denominado Iniciativa Latinoamericana para la Internacionalización de la Educación Superior y hemos utilizado el nombre breve INILAT. De ahora en adelante se van a encontrar seguramente en muchos lugares, esperamos, con nuestra iniciativa, para que puedan conocer sus actividades, puedan formar parte de ellas. Y bueno, vamos a iniciar la presentación, por favor. El siguiente slide. Bien, como ya Camilo nos ha introducido, de todas maneras queremos contarles que somos redes y asociaciones que trabajamos para la internacionalización de la educación superior en cada uno de nuestros países. Contamos con un amplio número de instituciones asociadas. Como ustedes pueden ver, los países son Argentina, Brasil, Colombia, Chile, México y Perú. Las asociaciones, ahí están los logos, muchos de ustedes participan en ellas. Learn Chile, la RCI ASCUN, la AMPEI en México, FAUBAI, FIESA, Red CIUN y Ready Perú. Estamos en este momento convocados, precisamente nos invitamos entre todos mutuamente para poder trabajar en el contexto adverso, pero muy desafiante también, en el que nos encontramos, y hemos dado lugar a a este espacio con una perspectiva de trabajo regional y con una mirada, por cierto, global. La siguiente, por favor. Como les decía, somos asociaciones y redes para la internacionalización que agrupan alrededor de 590 instituciones de educación superior de los países ya mencionados, y ustedes pueden ver en este momento el detalle de ellas. La ANPEI y FAUAI, con un amplio número de instituciones, FIESA, RedSun, alrededor de 70, LEARN Chile somos 24, como decía al comienzo, la RCI agrupa alrededor de 100 instituciones de educación superior, y Ready Perú, una joven pero muy interesante asociación que se está conformando con 15 instituciones peruanas de educación superior. La siguiente, por favor. ¿Qué es lo que buscamos? Como les decía antes, el contexto nos invitó y provocó esta, como digo, invitación, este espacio para unir esfuerzos comunes ante los desafíos que se nos vienen presentando, compartir y potenciar las iniciativas de internacionalización que se están desarrollando y crear e introducir otras para hacer posible que la internacionalización se siga desarrollando a pesar de este de las adversas circunstancias en las que nos encontramos, y que podamos plasmar resultados en todos los ámbitos del quehacer que son propios de nuestras instituciones, en la formación, la investigación, la innovación y la extensión y proyección social desde nuestras propias realidades. Antes ya se hablaba del concepto de la identidad local proyectada a lo global. Es un poco el carácter que nosotros hemos querido imprimir con una apuesta bien concreta a la acción. Por eso acuñamos este neologismo, si ustedes quieren, de la cooperación, que es parte de nuestra dinámica, uniendo lo que es la cooperación entre nuestras redes y países con acciones de desarrollo concreto de actividades, apuntando a una internacionalización, y esto es muy importante, la caracterización de este espacio, la caracterización de las iniciativas de una internacionalización integral e inclusiva, teniendo un especial carácter de apoyo, de énfasis, especialmente en instituciones de educación superior que son más jóvenes, que están en estadios de desarrollo de sus procesos de internacionalización más iniciales, más emergentes. Por lo tanto, es una iniciativa inclusiva, es una iniciativa abierta, como ustedes podrán ir conociendo. La siguiente, por favor. Nuestras premisas de trabajo son convergentes con estas ideas que acabo de mencionar. La amplitud para la cooperación interinstitucional es bastante amplio el desarrollo los ámbitos en los que nos queremos desarrollar, con flexibilidad. Por cierto, los tiempos demandan que tengamos mucha flexibilidad, con mucha voluntad para poder trabajar. Ustedes han visto cómo las asociaciones y redes esta mañana están presentes no solamente a través de sus representantes en este espacio, sino que también muchísimas universidades de nuestros propios países están participando en la CHEC. Hemos generado, junto con la organización, espacios y mecanismos para facilitar la participación, dando evidencia de una voluntad de trabajar juntos y de pensar, como dice acá, de manera diferente, cómo la colaboración se puede llevar de mejor manera. Con creatividad, por cierto, y lo que decía antes, con un especial énfasis en la implementación de propuestas concretas para la acción. Por cierto, en articulación y búsqueda de sinergias con otras actividades y redes que ya existen. Por lo tanto, es una iniciativa permanente, abierta, inclusiva, y que considera las otras redes que ya existen en este momento. Yo, por mi parte, quedo hasta acá, y a continuación dejo con la palabra a mi colega René Sigman de FAUAI.
Hola, mucho gusto. Bueno, como el proyecto es bilingüe también, entonces yo voy a presentar mis diapositivas em português. Enfim, os propósitos da iniciativa, rapidamente, como já foram ali salientados, é promover a cultura de internacionalização nessa dimensão sempre transversal, atingindo todas as missões e funções das instituições de ensino superior, fortalecer a articulação entre elas, garantir uma projeção internacional maior, esse também é um dos objetivos da iniciativa, ampliando, portanto, a ação da internacionalização, criando comunidades de aprendizagem nesse âmbito da internacionalização, sempre com diálogos, quando possível, próximos dos setores governamentais, tentando implementar políticas públicas na área da internacionalização da educação superior na região, aumentar a mobilidade internacional de pessoas, quando possível, de conhecimento sempre, nas diversas modalidades, portanto, garantir uma maior visibilidade para as instituições e para o sistema de educação superior de cada país, fortalecendo os processos de internacionalização com mais qualidade, fomentando também a pesquisa sobre os processos de internacionalização, enfim, incentivando e buscando novas práticas inovadoras na área da internacionalização da educação superior. O próximo. As 6 associações, num exercício conjunto, chegaram a alguns desafios comuns. Sem dúvida nenhuma, a grande incerteza que o contexto atual nos traz. Esse é um imenso desafio, que também afeta os recursos e as possibilidades de financiamento para a educação superior e para os seus processos de internacionalização. Isso tudo leva à necessidade de reestruturarmos os planejamentos estratégicos. Isso tem, evidentemente, impacto sobre a mobilidade internacional, coloca o grande desafio da virtualização. Há 6 meses entramos, há 5 meses estamos todos, e essa conferência é a prova, ao mesmo tempo, do potencial e da forma positiva que a gente pode usar esses novos mecanismos. Desafio também de diminuir e minimizar perdas, danos, e o desafio de ver aumentados, infelizmente, desigualdades, exclusão, xenofobia, racismo, como acabamos de ver, inclusive, na sessão de abertura, agora na primeira plenária dessa conferência. O próximo. Como já o Marcos salientou, a iniciativa definiu 6 principais projetos de ação, projetos concretos, que visam justamente a implementação. E cada um deles é coordenado por uma das redes, com a participação das outras. Então, muito rapidamente, vou apresentar as 6 propostas. A proposta dirigida sob coordenação da FAUBA e a implementação da aprendizagem colaborativa internacional online para a nossa região. A Argentina, número 2, Chile, o programa de intercâmbio regional na mobilidade virtual. Rede Peru, iniciativas de pesquisa internacional na América Latina. AMPEI México, políticas públicas para a internacionalização do sistema de educação superior na América Latina. RCI Colômbia, agenda comum e encontros para a área de gestão, intercâmbio de boas práticas, troca de boas práticas e o posicionamento da América Latina no setor da educação internacional. E a Argentina coordenando o projeto Competências para a Busca de Fontes de Financiamento, Alianças Internacionais que fortaleçam as redes latino-americanas. O próximo. A metodologia de trabalho para o desenvolvimento dessas 6 propostas, desses 6 projetos, eles são, evidentemente, o ponto de partida para o trabalho entre as instituições que integram cada uma das redes e associações nacionais. Cada um desses projetos vai estar sob a coordenação de uma das redes, mas, evidentemente, convidando as outras redes que integram a iniciativa e também alguns participantes externos. Cada projeto já está definindo o seu plano e o seu cronograma de trabalho, buscando sempre uma sinergia entre as diferentes propostas. E a ideia principal é que esses projetos possam beneficiar a um número cada vez maior de instituições que integram cada uma das redes nacionais que estão vinculadas a essa iniciativa. Acho que agora passo a palavra a Sandra Guarini. Graças, Sandra.
Gracias, René. Bueno, pues esta dinámica de encuentro, de colaboración y de acción, que muy posiblemente no hubiese fluido tan espontáneamente en otro contexto, hizo que nos lanzáramos a desarrollar conjuntamente lo que denominamos Encuentros de Redes para la Internacionalización en América Latina, una oportunidad para la cooperación, 3 espacios en los que nos organizamos de forma tal que que 2 redes, es decir, 2 países en cada uno de estos encuentros, se tomaron el liderazgo en la organización, y no solamente en la organización, sino en tener dentro de estos encuentros 2 rectores que pudiesen compartirnos su mensaje alrededor de la importancia de la cooperación y de una iniciativa de esta naturaleza en medio de estas circunstancias. Entonces, a partir de esos 3 encuentros, pues generamos una dinámica inicial. Contamos con una participación de 2.400 personas procedentes pues, de nuestros países de América Latina e incluso de otras regiones del mundo. En cada uno de estos encuentros procuramos, pues, además de tener una conversación alrededor de integración y colaboración latinoamericana en nuestro sector, procuramos también visibilizar nuestra cultura latinoamericana, presentando espacios muy ricos, particularmente Argentina, Brasil, Perú y México tuvieron la oportunidad en el segundo y tercer encuentro de incluir este componente cultural. Y tenemos próximos encuentros, y si bien esta es una agenda que ya tiene estas primeras actividades, pues no es exhaustiva, no es la definitiva. Si hay algo que caracteriza a esta iniciativa es que vamos construyendo sobre la marcha y somos conscientes pues que dada la naturaleza misma de la forma en que nace esta iniciativa, pues es probable que en el camino debamos pues tomar la acción sobre algún tema que resulte pues, prioritario para nuestra región, de manera que pues seguramente esta agenda sobre todo para el 2021 pues estará cargada de otras nuevas actividades que, pues, que aporten a nuestro sector y a nuestros países. La CHEC, pues por supuesto es el encuentro pues actual, donde ya veremos a continuación la rica agenda de nuestra iniciativa INILAT y de cada una de los 6 países y asociaciones y redes que hacen parte. En septiembre tendremos un encuentro de nuestra comunidad de aprendizaje en internacionalización de la educación superior, reflexiones para un nuevo camino en la internacionalización de los posgrados. Esperamos contar con ustedes en ese momento. En septiembre, de nuevo, nos encontraremos en esta dinámica de, al hablar de cooperación, queremos siempre mostrar los resultados y cómo venimos avanzando en el desarrollo de las diferentes iniciativas lideradas por cada una de las redes. El 12 de noviembre, de nuevo, evaluación de la iniciativa y pues un poco haciendo un feedback de lo que ha sido ese trabajo colaborativo y espontáneo del 2020. Así como la CHEC ha sido un espacio de encuentro de nuestras redes y asociaciones, pues esperamos también que las conferencias que tradicionalmente han liderado nuestros colegas pues sean otros espacios de encuentro para América Latina. Tendremos la conferencia anual de CONAGE Campey en diciembre, y en el 2021 tendremos, ojalá presencialmente, la conferencia FAUBAI en abril, la conferencia de FIESA en noviembre. Esto, de nuevo, pues significa pues, que estamos también abiertos a colaborar con otras conferencias, con otras iniciativas en la región, porque recuerden ese carácter inclusivo, abierto y de reflexión permanente que tiene INILAT. Compartirles un poco de la agenda que tenemos en la CHEC. Vieron los 6 ejes temáticos en los que trabajamos cada una de las redes, y estos ejes temáticos los van a ver también reflejados en la agenda de la CHEC de INILAT. Nuestras asociaciones y redes amigas están liderando sesiones académicas, workshops y espacios culturales muy, muy interesantes para, una vez más, compartir ese trabajo tan interesante que se realiza en cada uno de los países, y además compartir también un poco de la cultura latinoamericana. Entonces, invitarlos a todos a estos espacios que tiene INILAT dentro de la CHEC, pues señalando el 20 de agosto, dentro de 8 días, nuestra segunda sesión sincrónica, tendremos el Día de Chile, Y bueno, si bien será el Día de Chile, con una cargada agenda chilena, por supuesto que tendremos también esos aportes y esa participación de nuestras asociaciones INILAT. Bueno, pues muchas gracias, muito obrigado, thanks. Resaltar este carácter de nuevo inclusivo, multilingüe, en el que valoramos y ponemos sobre manifiesto lo orgullosos que nos sentimos de ser latinoamericanos, de la diversidad, y bueno, pues con esto darles pues un espacio, un break, que lo merecemos, aunque pues no sin antes motivarlos a que nos visiten en la exhibición, los diferentes stands de algunas, de hecho, de nuestras asociaciones y redes INILAT, pero además de otras asociaciones, redes y universidades que han querido hacer parte de ese gran espacio que la CHEC ha dispuesto para todos nosotros. Muchas gracias.
Muchísimas gracias, Sandra. Y pues, sin duda, esta gran iniciativa INILAT será un hito en el desarrollo y en el fortalecimiento de la educación internacional en América Latina y en el mundo. Mil gracias a mis colegas y a todos nuestros conferencistas e invitados el día de hoy. Bueno, con esto cerramos nuestra primera sesión plenaria. A continuación, los invito a entrar a su aplicación de JUA o desde su computador y hacer clic en Exhibitors. Ahí encontrarán una excelente oferta de todos nuestros exhibidores aliados y puede ser una excelente oportunidad para buscar convenios, unirse a redes y buscar nuevas oportunidades de colaboración en Colombia, Latinoamérica y el mundo. A las 11 de la mañana, hora de Colombia, los esperamos también para las siguientes sesiones paralelas. Mil gracias. Nos vemos de nuevo el jueves 20 de agosto para nuestra siguiente sesión plenaria. And so that brings us to the end of our session. Thank you so much once again to all of our panelists. Thank you to all of you, our participants. We encourage you to please get the discussion going in our community page, in our discussion forums, and to also visit our wonderful expo. Our exhibitors have put a lot of effort into providing you a wide variety of stands to visit. I will see you again, hopefully later today in some of our other sessions, but of course, I will definitely see you again, same time, same place, a week from today for our second plenary session. Thanks so much. Muchísimas gracias y nos vemos muy pronto. Bye bye.